Most of my friends that I met at school, they are working 60-hour weeks. They make plenty of money, but I don't think they're that happy. And for me, life is about passion. It's not about stability. We create our own traditions inside of the Mush space. Yeah. The first hour of every Mush, we're talking about the value system, and we're creating the agreements together and practicing the agreements. So one of the agreements is to share gratitude. So when somebody says no to a touch, you say, thank you for telling me. And this is not the normal default response. And actually, in general, if a person communicates a boundary, they are being vulnerable. They're taking a risk in order to continue relating with you. And the culture of the Mush encourages group interactions where you receive touch maybe from 5 or 6 or 7 people at the same time, and it's not personal. It's the intimacy is more oriented on a group level, not a one-on-one level.
Welcome to this new episode, and today I am here with Davi Rhein. How are you, Davi?
I'm great. Thank you, Luca.
Very nice. So, Davi is the creator of the Mush, which is very, very famous in Koh Phangan right now. Also is a space holder for Contact Improv and a yoga teacher. So, lots to talk about. First of all, I'd like to ask you, what is your story in life?
My story in life. I grew up in Minnesota in the United States. As a child, I was very involved in music and academics and sports, playing soccer, football, as most people call it, basketball, baseball, hockey, frisbee, ping pong, very competitive, and also really interested in mathematics, physics, philosophy, reading a lot of books, and living in the suburbs of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I grew up Jewish, but not very religious, but involved in the Jewish community quite a lot. And that informed a lot of my value systems, but also my skepticism about religion and about spirituality, which was a very important part of my path to go through this period of skepticism and what I would call sort of aggressive atheism, and then later discovering a much more open-minded approach to spirituality, and now a feeling of the interconnectedness of all things that is beyond explanation, but it's more of a feeling.
Very nice. So you were sort of very intellectually gifted and also physically, so that both at the same time. That's quite something, right? So did you have any particular passion? I mean, you had many disciplines and subjects you mentioned that you were into, but what was like sort of standing out?
When I was a child, I'd say my primary interest was music, actually. Oh. I played oboe and clarinet and bassoon. I played in the band and the orchestra, and then later I joined also the chorus and all of the musical theater productions. I was really into collaboration and creation as groups, and this was also the case for sports. All of the sports I played were focused on teamwork, and I found myself very frequently in a position of wanting to coach the other children and running up against the ego of the coaches. They did not like when an 8-year-old was giving advice to the other 8-year-olds. And this was challenging for me to see opportunities for improvement and very much want to share my perspective and to be put in a position of, this is not your role, 8-year-old David. It's time for you to just shut up and listen. And because of this, I, at a very young age, sought out leadership opportunities where I would have actually the structure where it was appropriate for me to be making suggestions, supporting people, guiding them, sharing my observations. And so at age 16, I found myself as the director of the marching band. They call it the drum major. So I was conducting the rehearsals and teaching the other kids how to march in formations and things like that. And so that was 20 years ago, and that was the beginning of my stepping into a role as a space holder and facilitator and a coach. And in that case, it was very physical, literally instructing them, you know, your body position like this, with the shoulders down, with the chin in this position, with the elbows in this position, stepping on the beat, on the left foot. And this skill set that I developed at that age, I still use very much in my current profession as a dance instructor and a yoga instructor.
Okay, sounds fascinating. And what did you study at school? I mean, and what was your beginning of a sort of a career or after school? Because
Sure.
many people in Koh Phangan, you know, they have two lives, the one before and the one after. So I'm interested if it's similar to you.
My formal education, I went to Harvard University and got an undergraduate degree in economics with a minor in psychology. After I finished this, I joined the Peace Corps. Peace Corps is a government institution in the United States that sends volunteers to foreign countries to give many different types of assistance. And so I found myself in Ecuador, assisting with an ecotourism project. So teaching the mostly Spanish-speaking guides how to speak English, how to interact with Western tourists, supporting them in creating the infrastructure to take groups of people on tours of a mangrove forest, which is a endangered ecosystem in Ecuador. So that was very interesting. Then when I returned to the United States, I got a job working as a data analyst at Target Corporation, which is one of the largest corporations in the United States. And yeah, so I spent 3 years mostly sitting in a cubicle doing this thing.
Okay, well, you had to do it, you know, like everybody else.
Yeah, I did. I paid my dues, and I learned a lot from that experience about what are the challenges of Western corporate life. And while I was doing that, I was lucky enough to discover yoga, to discover dance fitness, to discover Capoeira, which is a martial art that is very dear to my heart. And for those 3 years I was working at Target, I was basically waking up, going to a yoga class, going to work on the lunch break, going to the gym, doing some sort of fitness class, coming back, going to work, going back to the gym in the evening for another class, or possibly to play basketball or do other things. So my life was very focused on activity. And then in the second and third year of that time, I was doing a yoga teacher training, doing a dance instruction, fitness training. The style of dance I fell in love with at that time was called Nia. Nia is a fusion of martial arts, of some methods like Alexander technique and Feldenkrais method, and yoga, and various dance styles, including modern dance and jazz.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Very cool.
I was all the time scheduled and very physically active and learning a lot and bringing that philosophy into the workplace as well. I asked my boss at Target, can I offer yoga classes? Can I offer meditation classes? And they said, sure. When your work is finished, if you have time and space, you can use this conference room. And so I was offering a lot of mindfulness practices to my fellow employees.
Cool. I mean, it sounds like you're a wonder boy almost, like, you know, so talented across so many different disciplines. It's quite fascinating. So I'd like to ask you now, I mean, what happened after? So you were in this corporate job for 3 years, you said, and then something might have triggered a transformation, or did you have any sort of experience that brought you eventually on the road to Koh Phangan?
What brought me to Thailand in the first place was that whilst living in Minnesota, I began to study Thai massage. So while I was doing yoga teacher training and dance teacher training, I was also studying Thai massage. And I really fell in love with this form. The energy connection, the physical practice, and also since I was very young, I was always giving massages to my friends, and they were always telling me, wow, Davi, you're really good at this. You should study this. And eventually, during my yoga teacher training, I met another yoga teacher trainee who was a massage therapist, who started to show me more technique and saw how quickly I learned and said, you really need to study this formally, like you will go far. And he suggested the teacher, suggested the school, suggested the program, and I've learned in my life, when someone makes a suggestion to me, I feel inside, and if my body says yes, I just go. And
Cool.
I have had so many amazing suggestions made during my life. It seems like you ought to do this. My body says yes, and I just go for it, and I don't question. And I didn't know until recently that my human design says, yes, sacral authority, trust your gut. When you have a yes and it feels right, I don't need to sit and think and wait. I can really just take action. So I was practicing Thai massage. I was living this corporate lifestyle. I was not super happy with the idea to stay sitting in a cubicle working for a corporation to make more money for the corporation. Wasn't really aligned with my value system or my interests. And so when my Thai massage teacher said, Davi, you should go to Thailand and study with my teacher, I said, okay, how long is his training program? She laughed at me. She said, oh, there's no program. You just go. You go and you stay for as long as you can, and you learn as much as you can while you're there. And so from that moment that she invited me, I worked 9 more months and I saved as much money as I could, and then I quit my job and I moved to Thailand. And I spent the next 2 years living in mostly Chiang Mai, and also traveling to India, and to Singapore, to the Philippines, to Malaysia, because on a tourist visa you can't stay more than 6 months really in Thailand. So I did my 6 months in Chiang Mai, and then 6 months around the rest of Asia, and then back again. And that was beautiful, and I loved living in Asia. I loved living in Chiang Mai, and I loved studying Thai massage. And I found myself broadening my practice of bodywork and massage, moving beyond Thai massage into some other modalities, and understanding that most people have significant dysfunction in their body. The posture is really strongly affected by the ergonomics of our living environment, the use of technology, the use of cars, even sitting in a desk as a child and writing in this position, it's causing asymmetry and misalignment.
Sure.
And so I basically realized I've never met a healthy person in my entire life. And through studying in Chiang Mai with a very talented teacher named Mike Tan, he showed me a lot about the physiology and the anatomy, about the alignment and about the energy practice, and showed me, okay, so in the arm, the energy, it should be here, but when you're feeling for it, normally you won't find it where it's supposed to be. You have to go looking for it, and there's patterns of deviation, and 90% of people have the same dysfunction, and in palpating and feeling and sensing can see, oh, everybody is twisted in this same way, and there is a method by which to bring the muscle tissue into its correct alignment. So I've been, since I studied with Mike, on a path of really intensive self-study and studying the anatomy, the physiology, and just practicing for hundreds and thousands of hours to feel different bodies, to notice different patterns, to heighten the sensitivity in my own body.
That's fascinating, yeah. I think there's also something psychological about the posture, obviously. You know, if you're feeling maybe a little bit anxious or a little bit depressed, you tend to slouch a little bit, so stoop, it's something that I had a problem with, and still maybe I do. But certainly a lot more when I was younger, now I feel like through self-learning and practice, I am myself much better at carrying my body, particularly the upper side of it. But it is very useful work what you've done. I'm sure it's a part of self-knowledge and also knowledge of people, and it's a passion that's among the other ones. It's a passion that you've been developing, right, for quite a while now. So you were in Chiang Mai, and then you ended up in Koh Phangan, just because everybody eventually comes to Koh Phangan, right?
Yeah, well, I got really lucky. I was called to Koh Phangan to teach Contact Improvisation.
Yes.
They have a festival here every March.
Sure.
And there's also a festival on an island called Koh Chang. And I discovered Contact Improvisation in Chiang Mai in 2013. And very quickly I ended up at this festival on Koh Chang. And I've gone to that same festival 6 times now, I think. And so my life was very much back and forth between Thailand and between Los Angeles. I went first to Los Angeles to pursue a master's degree in business at UCLA. I did that from 2015 to 2017, and then went immediately back to Chiang Mai because I realized, okay, yes, I have these business skills. Yes, I could get a job as a consultant or a banker or something, but really it's just not interesting to me. Yeah, most of my friends that I met at school, they are working 60-hour weeks. They make plenty of money, but I don't think they're that happy. And for me, life is about passion. It's not about stability. And so I was back and forth between Chiang Mai and Los Angeles. And then in March of 2020, I just found myself on Koh Phangan teaching at a Contact festival when COVID happened.
Okay.
And I had packed up my life. I moved out of my apartment. I put my things into storage. I bought a one-way ticket. I was planning to do 1 month in Thailand and then maybe a month in India and then go back to Los Angeles. And then COVID happened. And I was like, wow, I mean, if there's going to be a worldwide lockdown, this is a better place to be than trapped in a city. So I stayed on Koh Phangan. Very fortunately, there was 40 of us from this Contact festival. We just stayed and we had a very beautiful sort of co-living community experiment with lots of dancing and art and connection. The island was totally quarantined from the outside world, and so there was no COVID there. There's also no electrical grid, no police presence. It's just a very undeveloped, very natural place. And so we basically lived on Paradise Island for 4 months. And then all of us came to Koh Phangan and continued the experiment here.
Okay, so now you're in Koh Phangan, and what's the journey in Koh Phangan itself? Because as I mentioned earlier, you are well known for organizing this weekly event called the Mush. So you have lots of experience across different disciplines, including massage, including holding space for people, etc., and contact improv, etc., etc., etc. So many things, right? And then you decide to sort of create an event where people can connect in a kind of soft, gentle, and loving way. Is that right? Or how would you describe the Mush?
The Mush, on the surface level, is a cuddle party. The idea is that we get together to share touch in a consensual environment. But beyond the cuddling, there's a foundation of authenticity, relating in a way that is truthful and vulnerable, sharing gratitude with each other, encouraging people really to ask for what they want and to say no to things that they don't want. What I've found is that in the Mush space, because we create a container that's made of agreements, the agreements are very specific and they're a little bit unusual, that it empowers people to relate with each other in a different way. That's not specifically about cuddling. Cuddling is a good reason to create these structures, but the structures apply to all relationships, including relationships that don't involve touch, including relationships that exist only over the phone. And so what I found is that while I started from a place of, wow, I love touch, I love cuddling, I want to create spaces where people can come together and have the human need for touch and intimacy met, over time it has grown far beyond just touch, and it's become a system for better relating, a system for being more truthful, more authentic in our communications. Yeah.
That's lovely, okay. So of course it's can be challenging sometimes to bring people that maybe are strangers to each other. I mean, there are going to be some core group that maybe you know already, but then there are going to be some new people, etc. So you're bringing people that maybe you don't know with a life story, a background that could be, you know, culturally diverse, because Koh Phangan is such an international place, different ages, different identity, etc. And you bring them all together into this place where people share some sort of intimacy, we can say.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite sensitive work, right? And what are the challenges of running a space like that?
Before I answer the question about challenges, I'll just say most of the challenges are mitigated or prevented by the structure I create before people come into the space.
Okay.
So first, I don't advertise the Mush. I encourage people who are at the Mush, if this experience was meaningful for you, if you wish for more people in your life to have these skills and to have this language, invite them. And so everybody who comes to the Mush, they come through a direct personal invitation from somebody who already navigated the Mush successfully. And then I have a website where people can read what is the Mush, what are the values of the Mush, what are the agreements that create the container. And the very first agreement is to relate to each other from a place of loving kindness, to really come into the space with the intention, I'm here to offer love to other beings in a way that is unconditional, and I'm here to receive love from other beings, assuming their most positive intentions. And so every person who arrives in the space, they're already primed to be loving, to be open to love. And that makes everything so much easier. The challenges in the mush space, there's two types of challenge. One are people who are very vulnerable, nervous, afraid. Maybe they don't have great access to their own boundaries. It's possible that they literally don't know what they want and what they don't want. And it's possible that they don't have access to communicate what they want and what they don't want. So I would call that a challenge on the side of vulnerability. Then the other side of the spectrum is people who really want to connect and want to share love, but they don't have the sensitivity to understand how their actions are being perceived. Maybe they speak too loudly, maybe they move too quickly, maybe they're a little bit too aggressive or too fast in initiating touch. Maybe they're not sensing, if I touch you and you don't move at all, this is a freeze response. And if I'm sensitive to it, I'm gonna ask you, hey Luca, are you happy that my hand's on your shoulder?
Yes.
Right. And he said yes, and he shrugged, and actually this doesn't feel like, yes, Davi, I like it. So I would probably take my hand off and say, I'm sensing it's not a full yes. And you're very welcome to touch me if you want, but I'm not gonna take the risk to continue touching you if what I'm feeling from you is a little bit of a like nervous system activation, freezing, and yeah, it's okay. We call this fawning. To fawn is to say nice words, but not really to mean them. And many people, I'd say most people, have a cultural conditioning that to say no to somebody, it's not a good thing. What if they get upset? What if they feel rejected? What if they pull away from you and they withdraw their love from you because they don't like that you rejected them? Many of us as children learned how to please others as our default. And so there are many people in the community who have this freezing response. And then there are some people who are really not skilled at noticing that freeze response. Maybe they're not aware of it, or maybe they literally lack the sensitivity to observe it. This world has many different types of neurodivergence. Brains work in very different ways, especially on the social spectrum. And so, yeah, my challenges as a facilitator is to create a structure where both of those types of people, the ones who are very vulnerable and the ones who are not that sensitive, can still interact in a way that feels safe for everybody.
And that's something that can be said about life in general, you know, because the same people are going to be outside and interact with each other. And of course we have cultural rights, cultural sort of rituals and conventions that help regulate the way we associate and you know, talk to each other and connect with each other. But that does not include particularly the scenario when you get more intimate with a stranger in a container. And I can see the usefulness of it, because indeed, if you learn how to be very sensitive and connected with others so that you can find the appropriate way of relating, particularly when you're touching or getting very close to someone into their physical boundaries, if you can be so aware and sensitive that you can do it effectively in that space, maybe it would be even easier, you know, to relate to people when you're not really touching them, but you're only verbally connecting with them, because you have the sensitivity of the mush coming with you. Is that right? Is there a learning curve that people go through? Is this something that is this a skill that they can apply to day-to-day life?
Yes, absolutely. We practice. You said everybody comes to the mush with their own cultural background, with their own traditions.
Yeah.
We create our own traditions inside of the mush space. Yeah. The first hour of every mush, we're talking about the value system, and we're creating the agreements together and practicing the agreements. So one of the agreements is to share gratitude. So when somebody says no to a touch, you say, thank you for telling me. And this is not the normal default response. And actually, in general, if a person communicates a boundary, they are being vulnerable. They're taking a risk in order to continue relating with you. So if you touch me, and I don't particularly like it, but I sit here and I tolerate it because I don't have the access to my no, as soon as we're not in connection anymore, I'm not going to feel good about relating with you. I'm very unlikely to choose to be close to you again. I'm now going to be possibly even triggered by seeing you nearby, right? And this is not that you did anything wrong, but just you maybe put your arm on my shoulder and maybe you remind me of somebody that I had some trauma with in the past. So it's not about you, it's about my lens on the world. And if I'm brave enough just to say, hey Luca, right now I'd prefer that we don't touch. And you say, wow, thanks Davi for telling me that. I appreciate that you're holding your boundaries and taking care of yourself. Now I feel empowered and I feel safe with you, and we can have a relationship that maybe later I will feel safe enough that I say, actually, would you put your arm back on my shoulder? And then you do, and I feel good about it instead of tolerating it. And there is this nervous system activation when people feel unsafe in nature, in the wild. They would run away because it's broad open spaces and they're fit and they're probably capable of running. Yeah. Or they would fight. And here in our modern culture, existing as we do mostly inside buildings and in a cultural setting where fighting is totally inappropriate, the only access that people have is to be very still and to hope that the thing that's traumatizing them will just think they're dead and go away, basically. And so we need to be sensitive to this, and I train people very actively. We do exercises to learn how to recognize this freezing response, and we also have an agreement about taking care of our nervous system. The most effective way that I have discovered to calm down a person's nervous system is that not only they, but also the people who are in proximity, we all breathe really slowly and deeply. We relax the jaw, relax the eyes, and make a nice gentle sound on the exhale. And so anytime a person starts to feel like this, all they need to do is go, ah. And anybody who hears them doing this, they go, here's a friend who needs assistance with co-regulating their nervous system. And suddenly there's 20 people all together who are relaxing their face, relaxing their eyes, breathing slowly, making sound. And the sound really does affect the vagus nerve and calms down the whole nervous system. It's really magical, very effective, and fast.
Wow, that's very cool. Sounds very good what you say, absolutely, yes. And I like the fact that indeed you are able to create some sort of culture which is specific to the group, that is very well expressed, that is agreed upon, so that people have some sort of structure to start with. And then in the moment, as the event develops, maybe you'll be able to spot if somebody is going onto a freeze or a fun, or if something is happening, and you can maybe just intervene or gently kind of help coach people in out of the discomfort. Is that right? And
usually in the mush, I am standing at the edge of the mush. It's possible to cuddle in a standing up position too. So I'm very often kind of leaning against the wall, cuddling with one person on either side, sort of keeping an eye on the space. Because I have quite a large space. You can have 30 people in a pile together. And the culture of the mush encourages group interactions where you receive touch maybe from 5 or 6 or 7 people at the same time, and it's not personal. It's the intimacy is more oriented on a group level, not a one-on-one level, which is much safer for people actually. And so somebody's massaging my arm and someone else is rubbing my head and I have my hand on someone else's head, and we're all together, breathing together, and there's this gentle movement happening inside the group. And after 15-20 minutes, somebody in the middle of the group is like, I need to shift positions, and the whole group will just disintegrate and then reintegrate in a new, I call it mushketexture. Every mush is absolutely unique because the ways that you can fit the bodies together, it's infinite. Yeah. And even with 2 bodies, it's almost infinite possibilities. And when you have 20 bodies, wow, you will never ever see 2 mushes that are identical.
Cool. And the name Mush, because indeed it's a kind of mush.
Yeah.
Is that right? Or how did you come up with the name?
You know, mush, when I was in high school, it's what my friends and I called cuddling mushing. And mushy is a texture, like a mashed potato. It's soft.
Green peas.
Liquid. Yeah, when they're really cooked thoroughly. Yes, exactly. And so when we go through life, maybe we tend to get a bit rigid, and then when we come together and we relax together, we get soft and mushy. And yeah, so for as long as I can remember, I've been calling it mushing. And then the mush actually originated as a direct outgrowth of contact improvisation. Because I was facilitating jams. At the end of a contact jam, it's very normal for a group of people who are tired after all of this dancing to just kind of make their way into a pile and rest and breathe together. And then I would say, okay guys, it's 10 p.m., time to go home. And they go, no, we just started cuddling, can't we stay longer? And so first I started to invite them back to my house to continue cuddling, but it went until 3 or 4 in the morning, and I realized people have a need for this type of relating with each other.
Sure.
So I just chose to host an event on a different night of the week, call it the Mush, and it grew very quickly in Los Angeles. Then I took a necessary break during COVID and started it back up again about a year ago here on Koh Phangan, and it's growing really quickly here as well.
Sure, because indeed, I mean, back in the days, families tend to be very large, you know, with grannies and aunties, and people, particularly coming from, you know, the poor background, which everybody came from a poor background, unless you were a nobleman of sorts, you know, an aristocrat, you know. They all kind of maybe lived in a room, right? So there was lots of interaction, lots of connection, lots of proximity, maybe with 15, 20 people at a given time. Whereas now, our kind of like modern living involves, lots of gadgets, lots of stuff that we like. It's great. I'm a modern kind of guy, you know, so it's not I'm against it. I'm saying that the other side of it is that people tend to be lonely and disconnected quite a bit because you're just you and your little flat in New York City or in London, you know. And even people traveling through Koh Phangan, etc. I mean, many of them are solo travelers, you know, they've been on the road for a little while, or even if they live here, you know. It's not so easy sometimes to have this group connection, this energy that comes and is well held and is positive, and it's very nourishing. As human beings, we need to be together, right? It's that's the way we are designed.
I agree. Yeah. This modern lifestyle, and it's quite recent in the broad scope of humanity. And you were saying even 100 years ago, most people are living in big groups together in small homes, and so of course there's going to be a lot of physical contact and a lot of intimacy. Also within a family group, it's possible to have intimate touch without the complication of sexuality. But in this modern world, where everyone has their own private living space, most of our interactions during the day are in professional environments where touch is prohibited, largely prohibited, because intimate touch and sexuality have been really meshed together in a way that is very difficult for some people to separate. And so in the work environment, for me to be doing this with you while we're talking, even this would be considered inappropriate in most professional environments. And so people are very touch starved. And because touch and intimacy has been sort of conflated with sexuality, and sexuality has become very dangerous for a lot of people. There's a lot of sexual trauma in the world. Most people have experienced at some point in time non-consensual sexual touch. What we do at the Mush is we really clearly separate intimate touch from sexuality. We have clear agreements about non-sexuality, and we even talk about the fact that maybe you will feel some sort of sexual energy. Maybe you're attracted to somebody in the space and you're cuddling with them, and you normally don't cuddle with people unless it's on a path towards sexuality. It takes time to change the programming and conditioning. And so it's okay if you feel sexual activation, but what's really important is that when you notice it, that you take a responsible choice to decrease that energy or to bring that energy up into the heart, because sexual energy is life force energy. When it's concentrated in the genitals, then it can be shared as sexual energy, and when it's concentrated in the heart or up in the head, it can be shared in different ways that are non-sexual. And so the Mush, by necessity, is a non-sexual space, and people come there to heal from sexual trauma as well. It's really beautiful. People who are like, wow, I never felt safe to have intimate touch in my life, and now I'm seeing that I really need this, and I actually need agreements in place about sexuality.
Yeah, I agree. And, I had many people coming on this program, particularly, sexual healers, so people, working with intimate relating, etc. And I came to the conclusion also by reading and studying that, this trauma is almost institutionalized. I mean, if you look at the rap around sexuality that institutionalized religions brought forward, over the years and the decades,
Yeah.
So sex has always been shamed, it's always been restricted, hyper-regulated, and that brought all sorts of problems with it as well, And I mean, some of the practices, like you're of Jewish origin, so like for circumcision, if you look at it through the modern lens, I mean, I respect everybody's beliefs, obviously, but you're taking this very perfectly beautiful little baby or child and doing something that is quite, strange, for instance. And it's not just this practice in particular, it's the whole narrative around sexuality. It's been so repressed, Okay, so there are many places that someone like you could visit or even live in, yeah? And you've been in Koh Phangan now for like 2-3 years or more, possibly. Why do you love Koh Phangan so much?
I love Koh Phangan for so many reasons, Luca. One of them is that I can live in a modern way with access to modern amenities, but also with access to really beautiful, almost untouched nature. I can get on my motorbike, drive for 10 minutes and be at a waterfall, or be at the beach, or be in the jungle.
Yeah.
I can get on my motorbike and drive for 5 minutes and be at a gourmet French restaurant. Like, the options, the accessibility, it's incredible. The cost of living here, while it is higher than the rest of Thailand, it's still much lower than living in Los Angeles. The people who come to this place, they're usually interested in growth. The people who come here, they're seeking something, seeking some spirituality, seeking some improvement in their health, physical health, mental health, emotional relating. It's a place of gathering of many interesting, talented, loving people. And so I can stay here. I don't even need to go anywhere. And the landscape is all the time changing. And such interesting people are coming here to share their gifts. So world-class facilitators of so many different events, they come to my neighborhood, they offer classes. It's kind of like almost as if I was going on a world tour, changing locations every week, but actually I stay in one place and the environment changes around me. So I feel very blessed in that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's such an interesting place, Koh Phangan, and it's one of a kind. I think there's not so many places. Because you lived in Chiang Mai, of course, that's an interesting place as well. But it's a big city, so more pollution, more noise to start with, a lot more other things happening. And also the community is not so sort of concentrated, right? So you have to go and find people. But here, there are the hangouts in Sri Tanu. You roll in and you see people that you know already.
Yeah.
I love the fact that there's a village feel, that I see, although there's lots of transient people, I see the same people over and over again. First, I see you on Friday night at the home center quite regularly, right? And it's not that I organize to see you, you're just there and say, hey, how are you in the sauna? Yeah. So I like the fact that it's a village feel as well. Yeah, what do you think?
I agree. I think living in a place that is too large with too many people can be overwhelming. People who live in major cities where all the time you're passing by thousands of people, it's kind of necessary to disconnect. It's not possible if you're walking on the street in New York City to make eye contact with and smile and try to connect energetically with every person. It would be impossible, and so people learn to narrow their focus and turn inside and be a little bit more isolated. On this island, it's possible for me to engage with energetically, through eye contact, with a smile, waving. As I'm driving my bike around, all the time I'm like, oh, hi, oh, hi, oh, hi. All the time I'm seeing people who I know. It's really nice, yeah.
Cool. Well, Davi, thank you for coming all the way to Chalaklam and sharing your passion for the Mush and for many other things in life. Indeed, I didn't know your background was so deep. With so many subjects and disciplines that you touched. Fascinating indeed. So thank you very much. Kapun kap.
Kap.